On the 15th of September 2008, a company that had survived the Civil War, 2 World Wars, and the Great Depression collapsed almost overnight. It was 158 years old, one of the largest banks in America. Its failure is still the biggest bankruptcy the country has ever seen. And here is the part that makes no sense. 6 months earlier, the company's own numbers said it was perfectly healthy. And the man in charge, one of the most powerful people on Wall Street, seemed to truly believe it. So how does a company this old, run by a man this experienced, walk straight off a cliff it never saw coming? The answer is stranger than a scandal. And by the end, you'll see it isn't really a story about a bank at all. For 14 years, Lehman Brothers really was one person. Its chief executive, Dick Fuld. They called him the gorilla. He had fought his way up from the trading floor, he was feared, and he had turned a struggling firm into a Wall Street giant. And this part matters, because it's what makes the story tragic instead of simple. Fuld was not a con man running a scheme he knew would collapse. By every account, he believed in Lehman completely. An enormous amount of his own wealth was tied up in its stock, and he wasn't planning an escape. He was certain the ship would float. But the higher he had climbed, the further he sat from the people doing the actual work. His office was at the top of the tower, sealed off from the trading floors below. Down there, hundreds of people could see exactly how dangerous the company was becoming. Up top, the man whose name was on the building saw only what made it that far, handed to him by people whose careers depended on keeping him happy. Which turns our question into a sharper one, not how did he fool everyone, but something stranger. How did the man with the most to lose end up the last to know? Look at this for a second. That one coin at the bottom is all the money Lehman actually had. Everything stacked on top of it is borrowed. For every single dollar the company truly owned, it had borrowed about 30 more. Here's why that's terrifying. If the things Lehman bought with all that borrowed money lost even 3 or 4% of their value, the coin at the bottom vanishes and the whole tower comes down. And what had it bought? The American housing market. Right as it began to fall. So by late 2007, there were 2 versions of Lehman Brothers. The one outsiders saw, calm, steady, profitable. And the one inside the building, quietly on fire. Which is where the question gets its edge. If it was this fragile on the inside, how did it look so calm on the outside? The answer is a trick, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every 3 months, a company like this has to show the world its books, like a financial photograph taken on one particular day. Investors stare at that photo to decide whether the company is safe. So right before investors looked, Lehman quietly moved about $50 billion of its riskiest things off the books. For a few days, the company looked leaner and safer than it truly was. The photo was taken, and then, once no one was looking, the $50 billion slid right back. Nothing was ever really sold. Nothing ever really changed. The problems left for a few days, dressed up the picture, and came home. This is the one idea to hold on to. You can forget everything else. They hid not their cash, but their story, renting the appearance of health a few days at a time, exactly when it mattered most. There was just one catch. To do this, Lehman needed a respected law firm to sign off that it was allowed. And in the entire United States, not one would. So Lehman looked abroad, and in London it found one that would. Now, this is the detail people usually get wrong, and the truth is more interesting. The London firm wasn't breaking any rules. Under English law, the transaction genuinely could be treated the way Lehman wanted. Under American law, it couldn't. So Lehman didn't go looking for a crooked lawyer. It went looking for a country where the answer was different. And that's the tell. When the honest answer at home is no, and you cross an ocean to find a yes, some part of you already knows what you're doing. The outside accountants whose job was to review the books signed off anyway. Year after year, the photo was taken, and year after year, it was approved. But a faked photo can only hold for so long, because inside the building, some people could see both versions of Lehman at once. Every company like this has people whose whole job is to say, "This is too dangerous, stop." Lehman had them too. But as the risky bets grew, the people saying stop were quietly pushed aside, and the people saying yes were rewarded. In a building full of clever people, that lesson only has to be taught once. Then, in the spring of 2008, one senior executive did the thing the whole company was quietly built to discourage. His name was Matthew Lee, and he had been there 14 years. He wrote his concerns down in plain black and white and sent them up the chain. 6 days later, he was gone. The company said it was a restructuring. Maybe it was. But watch what happened next, because this is the part that should make you angry. Lee didn't stay quiet. He told the outside accountants directly, and he named the $50 billion. The very next day, those same accountants sat in a meeting with the board members whose entire job was to catch this. And it didn't come up. Notice what did not happen here. Nobody shredded the warning in the dark. Nobody locked it in a safe. It was raised out loud to exactly the right people, and the company simply absorbed it and moved on. And that is the heart of it. Put the pieces together. A boss sealed off at the top. The people who warned pushed aside. A trick that hid the danger on exactly the days anyone looked. Accountants who signed. And a culture where telling the boss something he didn't want to hear felt like betrayal. Each piece, on its own, is ordinary. But together they built one specific thing. A company where the most important fact of all, we are not as safe as we look, had nowhere to go. Remember how this started? 6 months before the end, Lehman looked perfectly healthy on paper. Now you can see why. This wasn't just a company hiding the truth from investors. It had built a machine that could not hear bad news. And here's the part that separates this from every other corporate failure. Lehman didn't simply fail to notice the danger. It manufactured a picture of its own health 4 times a year on purpose, and then stood there and believed it. The lie went out to the world, but it also came back in. And the man at the very top, the one who believed most of all, was standing exactly where that machine was built to keep him, in the dark. It's tempting to picture Dick fooled as a villain who knew everything and lied. The truth is stranger and scarier. He sat at the top of a machine that protected him, right to the end, from the one thing he most needed to know. The denial wasn't a personality flaw, it was infrastructure. By September 2008, the trick couldn't hold. The bets were collapsing faster than any photo could hide, and the world finally asked the question the company had spent years avoiding. What is Lehman actually worth? Everyone scrambled for a rescue. One by one, they fell through, a foreign bank, then an American one, and finally the United States government itself, which decided that this time it would not step in. And then, the detail that says everything. Just 3 days before the end, Lehman told the world it had $41 billion in cash it could reach. A war chest. Investigators later found the real number was closer to 2. $2 billion. For a company that size, almost nothing. And the people running the company were still telling the world it was 41. Right to the end, they were describing a firm that no longer existed. In the early hours of the 15th of September, 2008, Lehman Brothers ran out of road. 158 years gone in a weekend, 25,000 people out of work, and a shock so large it helped freeze the world's economy and set off the worst financial crisis in generations. The photograph had finally been developed, and there was nothing inside it. 2 years later, an official investigation laid the whole trick bare. The $50 billion, the faked photos, the search for someone who'd say yes. Its verdict was icy. The trick had no real purpose, other than to hide things people didn't want seen. I should be fair here, because the story got quieter after that. The accountants always maintained they had done nothing wrong. Years later, they settled with New York State for $10 million, and with investors for about $99 million more, and in both cases without any finding of wrongdoing against them. And then the ending almost nobody expects. For the largest bankruptcy in American history, a collapse that helped tip the entire world into crisis, No one went to prison, not a single top executive. And Dick fooled? The honest answer is complicated and worth getting right. He genuinely lost an enormous amount. His Lehman shares, once worth close to $1 billion, became worthless. But he had also been paid extraordinarily well for years before that, and a great deal of that money was already banked. He did not walk away ruined. He also did not walk away untouched. For years afterward, he insisted the company had been sound, that outside forces, not his own firm, had killed it. That's the part that stays with you. Watching him, you get the sense he genuinely meant it. Because in a way, from where he was standing, it was true. He had been shielded from the worst of it by the very machine we just watched him build. He wasn't lied to, he was protected. And in the end, those turned out to be the same thing. So what actually killed Lehman Brothers? Not one villain, not even the reckless bet, as bad as it was. Underneath all of it was a simpler, more human failure. A company built so carefully to protect one number and one man that it ended up fooling itself. And this is the part that should follow you out of here. You don't need to run a bank for this to be true. Every organization tells a story about itself. The danger isn't telling that story to the outside world. The danger is the day you start believing it on the inside. Somewhere in the place you work, right now, there is a problem that someone can already see. The only question that matters is whether what they know can ever reach the person who can actually fix it. Because here's the thing about organizations. They almost never fall because nobody knew. They fall because the people who knew had no way to be heard. Dick Fould ended up alone at the top of a company he'd built into a very comfortable room, with no doors. If you've ever watched a place convince itself of something everyone quietly knew was wrong, subscribe. There are more of these.